Hello everyone, I'm Charlie from Dr. Wen, and welcome along to another daily Doctor Who YouTube video. As promised, I'm back again with the third video in a series of 12 videos I'll be doing. Each one I will rank episode 1s, 2s, 3s, etc. Today, as you can probably guess from this slide, I will be ranking episode 3s. This includes Orphan 55, Curse of the Black Spot, Gridlock, Victory of the Daleks, The Unquiet Dead, Planet of the Ood, Thin Ice, School Reunion, Under the Lake, Robot of Sherwood, Rosa, and A Town Called Mercy. There are 12 of them, and overall I think quite highly of episode 3s. I think the bad ones are very bad and the good ones are very good, unlike episode 1s, which I all think very highly of, and episode 2s, which have a bit of a lower average at 7.9. Anyway, let's get into this video, and I hope you enjoy. So, unfortunately, in 12th place we have a 13th Doctor story, Series 12, Episode 3, It's Orphan 55. I've given this a 5.7, and I'd say this is the only episode on this list that I would actively say I do not like. I don't like this episode. Any score below 6, I'd say I don't like it, mainly because it's got a very clunky start because they're two very different settings throughout the episode. This would have benefited from being a two-parter had it been better in general. I think the transition from the relaxing resort setting to the post-apocalyptic Earth was very clunky, and I don't think it was very necessary. I do quite like the resort setting at first, but I definitely don't like the future Earth concept at all. I don't really like it because it doesn't really make that much sense. Looking at how Earth looks, very green and blue in End of the World when it's about to be destroyed, so that isn't really explained very well. This also has way too many side characters, and I think if we just had some, then it would actually be quite good, but we had too many to focus on and it just ended up being a big mess. It does have some interesting ideas and does send a bit of an environmental message, but it doesn't really do much in the long run, and it's not very important. It's a filler episode, basically. I'm sorry, but it had to go somewhere. In 11th place, you probably saw this coming as well, we have Curse of the Black Spot. This is significantly much better than Orphan 55. I've given this a 6.9. I at least had some form of enjoyment watching this, mainly because of the first half of this episode. In my opinion, the first half of this episode is brilliant, and had this been a two-parter with the first half and second half being split, first half would probably have achieved above an 8, maybe even a 9, because I really liked it. It was sort of a base under siege and a pirate ship with a siren who could, get through water, or reflections. I thought that was a really good idea, but I think it was kind of ruined with the alternate universe with the same ship there and the hospital, and she was actually nice. I didn't really like that. I thought it was really unnecessary. This would be much higher had the entire episode have been like the first half, until it was just Amy, Rory and the Doctor there. Yeah, the Siren is an interesting villain. I don't really like, as I said, the plot twist where she's actually good. I think it's a really good concept, and I'm surprised it hadn't been done in Classic Who. I'm not sure if it has, but I've read lots of plot summaries from other Classic Who episodes, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of pirate-themed episodes besides Curse of the Black Spot. So there we go. I think this is a very easy watch, but overall, one of the weaker stories of Series 6. In 10th place we have Gridlock. I've given this a 7.5. This was the third episode of Series 3. This is a really good story. It's set on New Earth in 5,053,000,000, I think, and it is set about 30 years after New Earth and 53 years after the End of the World. It's the final story in the New Earth trilogy, and it's really good. I think this is slightly stronger than End of the World, and probably much stronger than New Earth. I think this is my favourite in the trilogy of New Earth. The Macra didn't really need to return for this. I think they just kind of looked at a list of Classic Who villains and just decided to, tick one off the list because they kind of had to. There wasn't really much substance to them. Before them they were crabs, and now they're crabs in a road. It just doesn't really make that much sense how they're there. I do quite like how it starts off the "You Are Not Alone" Face of Bow arc, because that's repeated throughout lots of the show, well, this series anyway, and kind of teases the return of the Master. Even when that happened, I thought that the Master would make a return at some point. Sadly, he didn't in the story. But this is really good world building, actually, the whole concept of New Earth being polluted and they had to go underground. And it must have taken a fair bit of thought and imagination to create this episode, so I really appreciate that as well. Overall, this is a pretty strong episode, but not one of the strongest on this list. In ninth place, we have Victory of the Daleks with a 7.7. I have a bit of a soft spot for this episode. It's sort of what's called like a guilty pleasure. Basically, most people don't like it, but I like it just because of how ridiculous it is. It's mainly ridiculous in the second half when you have all the Spitfires in space shooting at the Dalek ship. The Daleks, the new Paradigm Daleks, I quite like. Lots of people don't really like them. I don't see why. I do prefer the generic gold design or any of the classic designs, but they're still not that bad. I think, yeah, the second half is a bit ridiculous, and it's not really explained how that man on the left was, he was actually a robot who was a bomb, but then he thought human thoughts, and then he wasn't a bomb. I don't think that was very well thought through, and a subplot that wasn't really necessary and was only there to really fill in the time. Overall, I kind of like it. I do quite like the setting, you know, the whole war-torn Britain. I think it's not too overused. They do use the setting a lot, but I think it's good because they do different parts of it, you know, that sort of thing. So there we go. In 8th place, then we have The Unquiet Dead with a 7.7. This was only the 3rd episode of the 9th Doctor's era and the 3rd episode of New Who as a whole, and it's pretty good. I mainly like the Gelf. I think the idea of the ghost is really cool, and it reminds me a little bit of the 7th Doctor episode Ghostlight, which technically was only a few episodes previously, even though they were separated by 16 years, but still. I do quite like the idea of the Gelf, how they're not actually bad and they're just trying to create a gateway to their own universe. I thought that was pretty cool, actually. I do quite like the setting of Cardiff in Victorian times. I don't know, there's something really nice about the episode. Since it's set in Christmas, I consider this to be the 9th Doctor's Christmas special, even though it wasn't set in Christmas, since he didn't have one that actually aired on Christmas Day. So, yeah, I don't think Charles Dickens was needed in this. I think he was just kind of there so the historical would have a famous person in it. I don't really think he was necessary, and would have been a little bit better had he not been there. In 7th place, we have Planet of the Ood, the 3rd episode of Series 4. This is one of my favourite series of New Who, and this is arguably subpar for this series. Any other series, and it would probably be around the average, but I think it's definitely one of the weaker episodes of this series. However, I still really enjoyed this. I mean, the Ood Sphere is a really good setting, and I do quite like the whole design of it, all that ice not sculptures, the ice terraformation. It's really cool, actually. Yeah, this is really good. The Ood with Red Eye, they're actually really creepy, and I do like how Donna is kind of doing her own thing. This is only one of her first adventures. She'd only previously been in Runaway Bride, Partners in Crime, and Fires of Pompeii, so it's still fairly early days for her. And this has quite a good ending as well, because, with the Ood saying, "Your song is ending," I thought that was really good and kind of teased his regeneration 2 years before it happened. I thought that was really good, and I don't know, End of Time is quite a nice follow-up to it. So there we go. Quite a strong story, but not too high up on this list. Now we're getting into the top half. In 6th place, we have Thin Ice. I've given this an 8.2, and it's pretty good. I do really like the setting of the Frost Fairs. I thought that was really good, actually, and it had been mentioned that the Doctor had been to the Frost Fairs before, so that kind of gives an explanation to that. The Sea Monster is really cool, actually. I quite like the design and how, for the most part of the episode, we don't really see it. I thought that was really good. Reminds me a bit of Midnight, but at the end we do see it, and it's a pretty good creature design. I think it's really creepy, just the eye right behind them that you can see in that picture. I thought that was really good. And the main thing I love about this episode is that the Doctor punches someone who is being racist towards Bill, which was an awesome scene, actually. Not the person being racist, I mean the Doctor punching him. That was just brilliant, right across the face. Yes, this is probably the scene that solidified Peter Capaldi as my favourite Doctor. Bill is also an excellent companion. This is only her second adventure with the Doctor, not including the pilot. So there we go. In fifth place we have School Reunion. I've given this an 8.2. Some people say that this is blatantly fan service, so they're just doing, adding Sarah Jane Smith and K9 to rake in some Classic Who fans. I agree that's exactly what they were doing. That doesn't mean fan service can't be brilliant though, because this is a really good story. As I said, Sarah Jane and K9 are reintroduced in this episode, and for me it was really unexpected. I think had I watched Classic Who before New Who, I would have appreciated it more, but at the time I didn't really know who Sarah Jane was, but I kind of put two and two together and figured out that she must have been a Classic Who companion. Now I have watched some Classic Who, and although I've seen only one Sarah Jane episode, then I do see how this must have been really exciting to see at first, because it's the first time we've had any proper link to the classic series. Mickey is good in this episode. I think he kind of is there to lighten the mood, just a bit of comic relief, but he is really funny in this episode. It's a light-hearted, easy watch, and I do quite like how it's just a really simple alien invasion. It's not complicated or anything. It's just some aliens trying to, take over this school, and I really like it, honestly. It's brilliant. In fourth place we have Under the Lake with an 8.3. One of my subscribers, I've been watching their videos, and they have actually said that Under the Lake is their favourite episode, and they even did a quiz on Under the Lake, which I took and I did terribly, I got like a 3 or something. But after a rewatch, I really enjoyed this much more than I watched it before. It was a few years ago I did my first watch, and at the time I was only 11, 12 years old, so I didn't really understand it that much. This is a really good horror story, actually. It's got a good ghost design. I really like, that cliffhanger where we see the Doctor ghost. I really liked that. It makes Clara really good as well. I think she wasn't very developed in this series. I think they kind of scrapped all of her character development from series 7 and 8, which was a bit of a shame, but I think she was still really good in this episode, actually, and reminded me a lot of series 7 Clara. This has really interesting side characters as well. I think they'd all make brilliant companions, and they managed to flesh them out more in 20 minutes, and they managed to flesh out some of the 13th Doctor companions in an entire series. But yeah, I think it's got lots of mystery, and I do really like how the second part, Before the Flood, utilises the whole two-parter sort of thing. I thought that was really good, although we aren't talking about the next part in this, just Under the Lake. So there we go. In third place we have Robot of Sherwood with an 8.8. This is still very early days for the 12th Doctor, but Clara has been here a lot longer, and this is one of her first adventures with the 12th Doctor. I thought this was a really underrated episode, and I don't think it's talked about too much. It's historical, but usually I don't like historicals that revolve around one famous person, but I think this is an exception since Robin Hood's known as kind of a myth, and I think it's quite good to bring that to life. The Doctor and Robin's kind of banter in the cellar was hilarious. I really loved that. When I rewatched it, I was honestly really looking forward to seeing those scenes. Clara, I quite like how she was doing her own thing and kind of taking initiative. She didn't really do that in Series 7B. And this has fairly interesting side characters as well, like Robin, who was actually pretty brilliant in this. And yeah, I really like this. The castle spaceship is a bit weird, but I let that slide just because of how really, really good this episode is. In second place, you probably weren't expecting this, was Rosa. I give this an 8.9. Lots of people don't really like Rosa. I really don't see a problem with it. It is a historical, and I know I say I don't like historicals that revolve around a famous person, but this is an exception because it's basically sending a message, basically don't be racist, and I quite like how it's quite an emotional episode as well, because it's her like sitting down and not standing up. I thought that was a really powerful message as well. Krasko, the villain who's trying to stop that happening, isn't really needed. I think it's just there for a bit of filler time, to be honest. And this is really underrated and a really powerful story. Finally, in first place, we have A Town Called Mercy. I've given this a 9.2. Firstly, Carla Jets is a brilliant villain, and I wasn't expecting that he'd actually be the villain, unlike the Gunslinger, and I really like the Gunslinger's creature design, by the way. It's a really emotional scene where he, blows up his own ship. I thought that was really powerful, and it is historical, but I like it because it doesn't, like I said, revolve around a famous person. You may be noticing a pattern that lots of these, are historicals. Anyway, next time. Tomorrow, then, I will be reviewing the classic Third Doctor Jon Pertwee story, Spearhead from Space. No, sorry, not Spearhead from Space, Ambassadors of Death. Stay tuned for that, and goodbye.